welcome everyone to the 7th installment of the Senior Leadership Insights series, sponsored by the Graduate School and offered in partnership with the Department of Computer Science. This series was created and developed by a group of volunteers from the Graduate Board of Visitors, some of whom are joining us in the audience today. Welcome. To make the most of our focused time together, I'll address a few logistics up front. We'll begin the conversation with 6 key questions that we ask each of our featured guests. And after that, we'll welcome questions from the audience. If you'd like to speak, you can use the raise hand option accessible through the reactions button in the lower right-hand corner of your Zoom's window. This session is being recorded, so if you prefer not to appear in the recording, please keep your video muted and just share your questions in the chat. With those details out of the way, I would like now to briefly introduce Professor Jeffrey S. Chase, Professor of Computer Science and the Director of Graduate Studies for the department. His research area is operating systems and distributed systems, and his current research focuses primarily on cloud infrastructure services and federation, trust management and security in cloud environments, and automation for cloud-hosted applications. His group also conducts research on network storage, software-defined and end system networking, and internet service infrastructures. His research has been funded by the National Science Foundation and the Department of Education. So Professor Chase, I'll turn things over to you to introduce our special guest today, Dr. Krishnan.
Well, thank you very much for that introduction. It's a pleasure to have this conversation with Dr. Krishnan, who is an alumnus of our department. So he is a serial entrepreneur with over 28 years of experience in the high-tech industry. And he founded a company called Valicert very early in the development of the secure web. So we were a leader in public key infrastructure, or PKI. And that was in the late 90s, 97. And so he's been the chairman and chief technology officer at Valicert, which that went public in 2000 and merged with Tumbleweed Communications in 2003. So he has a new company now. It's called getinsured.com, and it's an online shopping portal for healthcare products and services. So he's the co-founder and CEO of Get Insured, and that's led the charge for software as a service approach to public sector healthcare. So they're a leading provider of health insurance enrollment technology for the state governments of California, Idaho, Minnesota, Pennsylvania, Nevada, New Jersey, and Washington. Yes, I am reading from a blurb here. So they've enabled more than 15 million health insurance enrollments to date. And he has a BS from our department here at Duke, a BS in computer science from the IIT, Indian Institute of Technology, and an MS and PhD from our department here at Duke, computer science. And we're very grateful for the services that he's provided to Duke as a member of the Trinity Computing Task Force and the Graduate School's Board of Visitors. So it's a pleasure to welcome Dr. Chini Krishnan back to Duke virtually for today's virtual conversation.
Thank you, Jeff. Such a pleasure to be here.
Okay, well, thank you. And why don't we start? Can you tell us just a little bit about your background? Obviously, I just went over a lot of it, but I'm sure you have something to add about your career path.
Sure. Very happy to. I guess, I would start just by saying that, I pretty much always had an interest in mathematics. And if you grew up as I did in sort of the, 80s, and you were good at math and not a whole lot of other good things. And, it was sort of the dawn and the early growth of, computer science was still, considerably more nascent than it is now. But choosing to study, computer science is a very natural, choice. And I do remember that at the time, the most cutting edge programming language was C, and certainly in both the bachelor's and the master's program, we studied, I suspect, far more, computer architecture and, compilers and binary logic and that sort of stuff as compared to, I suspect, what people do today. But what I remember most about my Duke education wasn't that, we acquired a particular skill or a particular class, but just the totality of it. I mean, the culture, the people, the rigor with which, subjects were pursued was sort of transformative in, helping, certainly me, kind of up my game on critical thinking. And that stood me, sort of very, very well over the last 30 years. And I can't say, Duke is full of very, awesome, kind, inspiring faculty. I mean, two people I definitely remember is John Reif, my advisor, who, pretty much sort of has pioneered entire fields of computer science. I also remember Pankaj, who at the time was a new graduate, and for a young kid like me that came out of India was so kind as to cook hard Indian meals in his spare time. So it
Professor
was just a
Pankaj
lovely, inspiring environment and full of connections and full of intellectual growth that I treasure to this day. So yes, it was fantastic. And then, of course, thereafter, I went on to be an entrepreneur, and we can talk about that a little more.
Yeah, that's wonderful. And I guess you were present at the creation of a lot of exciting technologies in the secure web back when secure communication for the web was being spec'd out, and interacting with some of those people who were involved in all that.
Absolutely. And that was very, I want to say in life, sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. And certainly that period on the early 90s is when there was a huge amount of activity around the internet with, Tim Berners-Lee, writing the World Wide Web protocols, and some of the early pioneers, folks like Paul Kocher and Bruce Schneier, coming together to, design the SSL protocol, which we understand today as sort of, the technologies that sort of underpin all secure e-commerce. And what I remember most from that time was, I founded Valicert back in '97, and that period of between '93 and '96 was very fertile with all kinds of new, browsers, secure browsers, and cryptographic technologies around PKI being fundamentally put in place as sort of the secure internet infrastructure for enabling e-commerce. What I remember most at the time was, I don't know that without, my time at Duke and without all the growth that spawned, that I would have felt comfortable sort of being at the table with some of, the leading lights of the day. And those are relationships that I have to this day. I like to tell my son that, I have my name on one of the, long-lived protocols of the online certificate status protocol associated with the internet. So it's a small, tchotchke from history, if you will. But Duke was very transformative. It was very easy for me to navigate thereafter, the field of cryptography, which is where I made my career for about 7 to 8 years. Valicert was a company we founded in '97. We took it public in 2000 and sold it ultimately in 2004. Our customers were, the people over the world that care the greatest about security. So they were the intelligence community, they were the large money center banks. And one neat story I still remember from the period is that there was a time when if you wrote an out-of-state check, which as I understand, has ultimately got to get aggregated from, say, the Federal Reserve of San Francisco to the Federal Reserve of New York, they would use our software to transmit, it says, transfer digital images of those checks securely on an aggregated wholesale basis from one Federal Reserve to another. So that was fun. It was a lot of good fun.
Yeah, one of the questions that we get a lot from graduate students or prospective graduate students is the question of, what kinds of roles there are in different organizations for people with graduate degrees. I wonder if you can comment on that, sort of some of the organizations that you've worked for and typical roles for people with graduate degrees in those organizations.
Absolutely. And I'll take the example of Get Insured, which, is what I'm doing today to kind of illustrate it, because, one of the things that's fabulous about Duke is obviously you can get a fantastic computer science education at Duke and kind of pursue it as much and as deeply as you wish. But what's also fantastic about Duke is a world leader in English and history and diplomacy and financial markets and healthcare and energy policy and all kinds of things where in a world where software is sort of eating the world, as some people say, in a world where software pervades every human activity. Duke is a fantastic platform for graduates, I think. So just in our company, for example, we have not just engineers, but we have project managers who think about risk. We have healthcare policy mavens that kind of think about the Affordable Care Act and how Medicaid is evolving and how child support and needs to evolve in the era of COVID, and how people need care in all kinds of different situations. So whether you're a health policy person or a computer science graduate or a business school Fuqua graduate that wants to think about how to transform the public sector agencies that we work with, we have, I want to say, room for a lot of different disciplines. So different people, different roles, but sort of driven by one common purpose. And the common purpose being, how do we help our customers, which are really large public sector agencies, truly serve their populations with much, much greater efficiency. Because if you can, get somebody on health insurance or Medicaid or child support, that much faster, that's a life you're saving. That's a meal you're helping a child have. So the impact of what we do can be truly sort of transformative and truly, up the quality of lives for our fellow Americans.
You've already said a little bit about the value that graduate training offered you or to offer to people generally in taking those roles. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
So I do, and what I want to add just sort of expands on sort of just the difference between hard skills and soft skills. So we talked about the fact that Duke has, you can not just learn one thing, but you can be broad and you can be deep at Duke. But there's a second thing which I think Duke is phenomenal at, which is when you think about sort of the things that people need ultimately to survive, to thrive, and to do really well in any worthwhile field of endeavor. I mean, ultimately in today's world, I mean, you need strong critical thinking, you need energy, you need passion, you need confidence, you need the benefit of an interdisciplinary education. You need foresight, and you need to cultivate a sense of purpose. And Duke is a place where I think you can get all of that. So in other words, Duke is a place where you get all those things, where not just in the classroom, but also by hanging out with people, outside the classroom. And that's something that makes Duke a special place.
Are there any skills or training or experience that you wish you'd had in graduate school to prepare you for your path?
I do. I mean, in hindsight, I wish I had spent another year simply putzing around and learning, liberal arts and history and English and learning how to make movies and financial markets and that sort of thing. Not because when you're in your early 20s and you feel like somehow you've got to get into, you have the sense of speed and energy and sort of, a desire to sort of get things done and move on. But in hindsight, I wish I had taken more time and sampled much more of what Duke had to offer. Because, it's not quite a regret per se, but it's certainly something that I would say, like, look, if I was in my 20s again and I was pursuing my graduate education at Duke, I would probably take that extra year to do that.
Do you have any other comments about what students who are interested in developing careers to move into leadership roles in the tech industry should do to prepare?
So that's a fascinating question, and the best answer I have for that, Jeff, sort of draws from two things, which is the speed of technological change and the speed of innovation is only increasing and it's only accelerating. When I was an entrepreneur in the 90s, I mean, we didn't have Y Combinator and all these very structured classes and forms of innovation, which entrepreneurs can use today to kind of navigate the process. The pace of innovation, the number of startups, and the level of just the gross amount of activity today is probably somewhere from, I don't know, 50 to 100 times larger than where it was, as compared to where, things were in the 90s. So the question is, given that pace of change, what's going to be true about today's students is their career is going to definitely change at least a few times, over the course of, the fields they work in, what they do. Entire technologies are going to get transformed between when they start and when they end their careers. So the question is, how do you prepare best for that? And I think how you prepare best for that is certainly by, doing really hard things at school, which is something Duke is great at. So you can kind of push yourself to take some of the hardest classes. So you learn how to, it's not just that you master a particular field, but you get really good at doing tough things, right? And so, that's a big skill. But I think what's also another skill is, learning to be, flexible and roll with the punches and sort of know that, sometimes, you'll like spend 6 years in one field and that field might reach a dead end and you might need to move to an entirely different area. But like, if you, think about the process of your learning as not predicated on a particular field, but sort of this broader, canvas of just getting good at learning a lot of good things, which is something Duke is a fantastic platform for. I think that's what's going to keep today's graduates in good stead.
Thank you for that. And I think we want to take some questions from the audience. So I'll turn it back to Melissa to lead that process.
Terrific. Well, thank you, Chini, and thank you, Jeff. Audience members, if you would like to ask a question, you can use the reactions button on your Zoom control panel to access the raised hand feature. And looks like my lights are going out with lack of movement. So pardon my wave here to try to reactivate the lights. All right, it's not working, but also if you would prefer to just pose your question in the chat, we can also moderate the questions to Chini that way. And we'll give folks just a moment to see if they want to jump in. Chini, while we wait for folks to jump in, for the students who are on the call, I think there was some interest in whether Get Insured offers summer internships for graduate students. Are there any opportunities for current students to come work with you?
Absolutely. And what I would encourage anybody on the phone to do is, please connect with me on LinkedIn and, send out a note, and I'll be glad to connect people with the right opportunities. Yes, we do lots of summer internships and they're always popular, and I would love to have as many, of folks here as possible.
We have a question in the chat about the role of open source in security for software or hardware, and if you have views about that open source security.
I guess two thoughts. Open source is a huge thing, but I do remember something. Bruce Schneier, who's one of the leading lights in computer security, once told me 20 years ago, which is when you think about almost anything in cybersecurity, if the underlying security of the system has to rely on the particular way you did it or the source code being kept secret, it's not very good security. Good security relies very much on things being sort of out in the open, subject to a lot of testing and a lot of critique and a lot of pressure testing. So I am at a very 20,000 foot level, hugely in favor of open source, but I don't have words of wisdom to add sort of beyond that. It's been a good 15 years since I worked in cybersecurity.
But no security from security.
No security from, yes, indeed.
Right. Lots of eyes on the source code.
Lots of eyes on the source code is a good thing.
And we have a question about how to keep up with innovations and make strategic decisions for your company. That is, are there techniques you use or sort of incorporate into your habits to strategies that you use to keep track of what's happening in the industry and make sure that you're current, so that the decisions you're making are tracking the cutting edge?
So I wish I had some sort of wise answer for that, but actually the truth of the matter is that here's the way I think about it. I mean, the journey of your career and your job, whatever it is you do, ought to be fundamentally fun. And if you had to pursue your career saying, oh, how can I keep up with this and how can I keep up with that? Pretty soon it's going to feel like drudgery, and you're not going to want to do it beyond a point. There's only so much you can do that way. On the other hand, I think let's approach it with a different philosophy, which is, for me, I'm like a curious kind of guy. I like to learn all sorts of things about all sorts of stuff, whether it's useful or not. And what I found over time is, some percentage of it sticks with you and some percentage of it doesn't. But the stuff that sticks with you usually turns out to be the more memorable stuff that survives the test of time, and you use that to make good decisions. And, I certainly do that. The only other thing that I would sort of advocate is that, we live today in a world where, there's just too much noise. And the popular news and the popular press has just a very low signal to noise ratio on the quality of information you get. So, certainly, consciously attempting to filter the noise out and reading good stuff is, I think, a good strategy. But beyond that, my advice to aspiring graduates is do the stuff you're interested in, because that way it won't get old and you'll sort of enjoy the process. And then the stuff that sticks out of it will be the stuff that you'll use to develop whatever strategy you want, is sort of the way I think about it.
And of course, there's another question in the chat that I think is a continuation. That is one of the things that you have to watch for to stay current are threats that might be coming on the horizon. Do you see any sort of particular ones in the security space? There's another cybersecurity question. Anything that you're concerned about coming down the?
There isn't something I'm particularly concerned about there, but the one thing I would say is that the cybersecurity is going to change and radically be transformed as a result of the quantum computing, revolution. It's coming. It's not there yet. We still don't have quantum computers they're right on the verge of being really, really interesting, with companies like Rigetti and Xanadu and others, kind of getting to a point where, they are going to make truly meaningful, impacts to the way, computing and computer science is sort of prosecuted. But once that revolution is here in about 5 to 10 years, I do think that cybersecurity will be transformed, and the ways that we do security, particularly communication security through cryptography, are going to be pretty fundamentally changed. And so, it's the great thing about it is it's a young field. There are plenty of opportunities to have fun and make money for the next 30 years in cybersecurity.
I think we have a hand up. Is there, Melissa, do you want to?
Sure. I think Yile, Monica, if you would like to unmute and ask your question.
Hi, I want to ask a question about, do you have any advice for people who just enter this industry? Because I'm a first-year master student, and I feel it is hard to stand out from other CS students to let maybe the recruiter to see that like I'm different. I wonder, is there anything particular you are looking for when you are recruiting like from various candidates?
So that's a great question, and we get that all the time. Here's what's working in your favor today. Right now, the world at large is going through a massive labor crisis, massive labor shortages across the board as a consequence of COVID. And there are great things that have occurred out of the work from home revolution. But one of the side effects of the work from home revolution and people wanting to, sort of change jobs and look at the world differently is there's a phenomenal labor shortage across all fields. And it pervades, the labor market at large. You're sort of seeing it in the inflationary effects. So what that means fundamentally is that you've got a good hand to play. And what I would recommend is certainly go through the recruiters and do the things you have to do, but make your own efforts to figure out the companies you want to work at, connect with the leaders at those firms, through applications like LinkedIn. Send, if you don't know somebody at the firm, figure out somebody who knows somebody and, figure out how to connect from there. Use your Duke alumni networks. I've found that, certainly in my career, when I don't know somebody and, if there's somebody at Duke who went there, like they would not, 8 times out of 10 be willing to take an extra 10 minutes to make a warm introduction for you. So, think about recruiting as a selling process. You are, fundamentally, looking to, package up who you are, your energy, your passion, your knowledge, and your ability to make a difference. And you want to make it sort of come alive, in the process of recruiting. So, as I say, all's fair game. So network, widely, make warm connections, talk about particular projects you have done that, can and will be of interest, to people, and recognize and look for the companies that have large numbers of positions open.
Thank you.
So there's,
sorry, Jeff. I saw we had one more question in the chat, and
yeah.
maybe we can give maybe a 1-minute answer, just so we make sure we get this question in as well. So,
okay, so
the question is, how do you recommend navigating employment options after a PhD? How do you leverage that skill of learning to tackle tough problems versus more specific skills, such as being familiar with the framework?
That's a great question. And what I want to say is, the value of all the rigor and all the deep thinking you put into your PhD plays out, in the entire trajectory of your life. It's a lovely, lovely asset. It's the asset that's going to keep on giving. And sometimes what happens is that if you're a recent graduate, you're very focused on, okay, well, how do I get my first job? And how do I, get to what it is I need to do next. And that can feel daunting after many years in academia. But the rules of transformation there and the rules of what it takes to be successful are no different than what you would do to sell yourself or make your case for why you need to be hired at any other stage in your lives. So I'm not sure I have something hugely more intelligent to say, but each step in your life, each step of the transformation you do is fundamentally a challenge. Embrace it with joy, embrace it as a lovely adventure, and it'll play out just fine.
And with confidence.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. I think we're past our time.
Yes. So let me go ahead and wrap up, but I know there's a hand up, and what I have a plan for engaging there. So I want to thank the audience for being so engaging today, so engaged, and to Chini for his wonderful, thoughtful answers to the terrific questions that the audience pitched. And thank you so much to Jeff Chase for hosting today. We look forward to seeing many of you for future events in this Senior Leadership Insights series. Our next session will be on February 22nd at 1 p.m. and will feature Dr. Tomiko Brown-Nagin, who is Dean of the Harvard Radcliffe Institute and Professor of History and Constitutional Law at Harvard University. Good afternoon to everyone.